So player exit interviews at the end of the season are always interesting to me because on one hand, you have players giving their usual canned responses or giving the answers that the media just wants to hear that are pretty vague, but at the same time, you also have tidbits from these interviews that maybe you didn't expect, or even the tone of their comments, their body language that you can pick up on for where a player's head is at and what it means for their future. Now, a good portion of the Bulls players, main players anyway, did have their end of season exit interviews to the media yesterday, with the exception of Zach Lavine, since he is currently in the health and safety protocol and under the weather. And there was also a lot of takeaways from these interviews. So in today's video, we're going to be going over these key takeaways from these pressers, what it means for the Bulls this offseason, and the path forward, as well as my general thoughts on some of the comments from these guys. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. So a number of players were interviewed yesterday to give their thoughts on the season, key learnings, and what their plans are for the offseason. This included guys like DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, Nikola Vucevic, Alex Caruso, Patrick Williams, Coby White, and Dosunmu. I was a little surprised that we didn't hear anything from Billy Donovan or the front office, as they generally have their media availability at the end of the season when the players do, but perhaps those are going to be scheduled in the coming days. Maybe even by the time you're watching this, their exit interviews will be live. But either way, a lot was discussed and reflected upon. And most players agreed while the end of the season was disappointing, they did acknowledge that health and injuries kept them back from reaching their true potential. And regardless, getting the Bulls back to the playoffs was a positive in their view, and that overall this season was a great experience that they can continue to build upon. Nikola Vucevic in particular emphasized that contending teams aren't built overnight, and that it takes time to build what the Bulls are trying to do. And at the end of the day, pretty much all of these guys interviewed agreed that continuity is key for this team, and the front office has emphasized that to them as well. As such, they do expect that the Bulls' main core will stay intact and adjustments will be made to really round out the roster. And so I actually want to start there because I received a little bit of criticism for this on Twitter, which, by the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Bulls Central YT. A link to that can also be found in the description. But with virtually all of these guys saying they expect this front office to keep the core intact. Lonzo Ball even mentioned that he would love to see the front office run it back with this crew, which I understand what the guys are saying. And in a way, sure, maybe they kind of have to say that because it's not like they're going to get up there and publicly say, no, I want this core to be broken up. I want this guy gone because they didn't fit the roster. Like, none of that's actually going to be said in a public-facing interview. And while I agree, I think continuity is absolutely important, especially when this was only the first season with this new roster. I do think that running this team back would be a mistake. I said it in my video the other day. This is a good team, a very talented team, and it's a much better Bulls team than we have seen in years. But there are still a lot of holes and gaps in this roster that need to be addressed, and running it back completely wouldn't be making progress forward, in my opinion. I think breaking up the core, yes, probably isn't the best idea, although I do have some thoughts on that as well. I might share that in a different video and what the alternatives could potentially be. But there is no question this roster needs some retooling, really, as it relates to their bench and role players, because with a core like Lavine, should they re-sign him, DeRozan and Vucevic, all great players, you need more complementary pieces to make up for their deficiencies on defense. Yes, Caruso and Lonzo provide that, and sure, that was probably a big factor for why the Bulls fell apart when those two missed quite a bit of time, but you're still going to need a more well-rounded roster if these guys are going to be your core. So I don't think running it back makes sense. I think some small retooling needs to be done. The Bulls really need to assess the future of Coby White and his role on the team, especially when they have a budding player in Dosunmu, who is a much more well-rounded player than Coby is, not to mention the fact that the Bulls have been so crowded in the backcourt that you really need to prioritize some bigger bodies. And if you're the Bulls, when looking at your guards and who you can sacrifice for some front court players, you're not going to move on from Lavine or Lonzo. Caruso is also too important to this team, and he just signed this past offseason, so I can't see them giving up on him that quickly either. So it really comes down to keeping Ayo or Coby for this team long term. And I have a hard time seeing how this front office chooses Coby over Ayo at this point. Yes, there is some potential with Coby that maybe still hasn't been fully realized, but Ayo has a higher ceiling than Coby White does, in my opinion. So again, I know the players have to sort of give these responses, but running it back as currently constructed isn't the way to go, especially with the way this team crumbled at the end of the season. Now, some other callouts from the exit interviews, which the interview I was interested in the most and what stood out to me the most, and that was from Lonzo Ball. And the reason I was interested in hearing from Lonzo is because we really haven't been able to hear from him since his injury. Because unlike the rest of the players who we get to hear in post-game press conferences after every game, Lonzo didn't have any post-game pressers since his last game with the team was in mid-January. And I think the main thing on Bulls fans' minds, or at least mine anyway, is what's going on with your knee, dude? Because we all know, or we thought, he was going to be coming back 6 to 8 weeks after getting injured, and the timeline kept getting pushed out. And then he was ultimately shut down for the season. And we also know that Lonzo has had issues with that same knee in the past. He had the same exact surgery after his rookie season. Like, what's going on? Is it something that we need to be concerned about? And what really had me worried, based on what he said in the actual press conference, and I guess I shouldn't really fault the guy because I would rather have him be honest over any basic answers players usually give to the media. But he said, when asked about the progress of his rehab since having the surgery in January, he said, quote, he's kind of at a standstill, which I take from that really meaning there's no progress that's been made since the last update we received, which was that Lonzo wasn't responding to his rehab well and as a result was going to be shut down for the season. He added that he was likely going to be seeing a specialist in the coming weeks and consider next steps because he's still having pain in that knee. Like, that is not something you want to hear if you're the Bulls, a guy that you just signed to a 4-year deal to really be your point guard for the foreseeable future, who is only 24 years old and hasn't been able to stay healthy in any of the 5 seasons for which he's played in his NBA career. I like Lonzo. You guys know I was critical of the signing. I didn't like the idea of Lonzo Ball for the Bulls as their point guard with the other free agency options this past offseason, but Lonzo really won me over with his play at the beginning of the year. But availability trumps everything. And if Lonzo, at this early stage in his career, is already showing signs of being injury prone, it doesn't matter how impactful of a player he is for this Bulls team if he's not able to stay on the court. Now, some other call-outs we got to hear from Patrick Williams, who emphasized a lot what we heard at the beginning of the season on Media Day, and that was really around being a more consistent player. I mean, sadly, we didn't really get to see Patrick deliver on that promise in his second season because of the early season injury that effectively sidelined him for most of the year. But either way, I liked the way in which Patrick took accountability and ownership for what is expected of him and really understanding the importance of what the organization is expecting of him and his role going forward. Like, we can't forget that he was the Bulls' number 4 overall pick, a pretty big investment, and this is going to be a very important offseason for Patrick as he is set to be 21 going into his 3rd year. He then added, and DeMar mentioned this as well, that he's going to be spending a lot of time with DeMar DeRozan this summer in what DeMar called a summer of hell, that DeMar is actually going to be inviting a lot of teammates out to LA to work out with him in the offseason to really put them through a grind. A lot of what he has done every offseason of his career, including 4 a.m. workouts. DeRozan also said he picked up this offseason routine from Coby. No, not Coby White, the late Kobe Bryant, which anytime you're following a routine or regimen of Kobe Bryant, you're doing something right, as Kobe was the ultimate competitor, one of the greatest competitors in the game of basketball. And this is great because Patrick Williams, you know, for some of the criticism he gets from impatient Bulls fans, he has all of the skills and intangibles to be a very great player in the NBA. And what he really needs right now is that mentorship from older veterans who've been around the league for a long time and know what it takes to be great. Patrick is still a project, as much as we would like to see him at his peak now, and with time, the right development, mentors, and instilling confidence in him, he's going to be an important piece for this Bulls team going forward. A few other takeaways. Ayo mentioned that he does want to be a part of the Bulls Summer League team yet again, which I love that. I love that because Ayo, as good as he was in his rookie season, probably has earned his right to not attend Summer League going into his sophomore season. Like, if I remember correctly, I don't believe Lauri Markkanen, Wendell Carter Jr., or Coby White played in Summer League before their second season. I could be wrong about Wendell. I think he might have actually played in the Summer League in his second season. And for Ayo, who is likely going to make an all-rookie second team, you don't typically see players who have clearly shown that they're ready and able to play an NBA level go into Summer League in their sophomore season. So for Ayo to want to take on that opportunity to develop his game even further, acknowledging that he still has a lot of work to do to get better and having that desire to work on his game as much as he possibly can, is a great sight to see for your second round pick rookie, especially considering how impactful he was this season, being thrusted in a role where he takes on more than expected because of injuries to guys like Lonzo and Caruso. Then finally, Coby White added and stressed how he really wants to work on his ball handling as well as getting stronger, bulking up in the weight room to help him become a better defender. I don't know, maybe I'm just being a little too harsh on Coby, but I really don't see him being in a Bulls uniform next season. If I'm wrong, that's fine. I just also don't see how him getting stronger is going to make him that much better of a defender. Sure, if you can bulk it up a bit, it makes you less susceptible to getting pushed around. You can stop guys driving to the basket a little more easily. You're able to draw charges better. Like, yes, I get all of that, but the defensive effort doesn't just sit with your strength. It also has to do with your IQ on that end of the court when it comes to playing off the ball defense and not getting lost. You also have to work on your lateral quickness. You have to work on being more aggressive when guarding your man on the perimeter, but not being too aggressive where you're just committing fouls on every play, and having that quickness to intercept passes as well. Also for Coby, I'll continue to say this. If there's anyone who needs to work on being a more consistent player, it's Coby White. Tired of seeing him going off for 20 plus points, knocking down a bunch of threes to follow it up with 4 straight games where he shoots 4 for 25 from 3 in that time frame. Anyway, guys, a lot to unpack. This is a very high-level overview of the season-ending exit interviews. I'm really just highlighting some of the main takeaways from the discussion. You can watch the full interviews on the Chicago Bulls official YouTube channel. I want to know what your guys' thoughts were on the exit interviews from the players yesterday. Let me know in the comments if there were any key takeaways or items I missed that should have been called out. And of course, as always, guys, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you in the next one.